We have a lot to get into today, so we can't waste time, but I do want to open this poetry discussion with a personal story from the channel itself. A little while ago, I had made the point when talking about the trench poets from World War One that that's one of my favorite movements in all of literature, the trench poets, because they were so raw and because they were so poignant. And I made the point that there's not a whole lot of literature around World War II. And I thought, part of that is kind of when you have, for example, a traumatic experience in your childhood, you don't form memories around it. Your mind kind of codifies that thing and just gives you phobias about it. And I thought that kind of maybe that was what was going on with World War II. The horrors of World War I were extreme, but they were explainable by the barbarity of human nature. The horrors of World War II are so horrific, we don't really have, in my opinion, the tools to deal with them. So I thought that maybe that was what was going on there. I found here some literature from World War II. And now, after reading it, I kind of wish I hadn't. And I have a picture to show you that will kind of outline why here. And then we have two terms to talk about that I think are pretty fitting for this poetry discussion. The poem in question is Welcome to Strip Cover Loop, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Adrian Ford. This poetry discussion will appear in the poetry discussion playlist, now over 600 videos strong. The poem in question is The Death of the Ball Turret Gunner by Randall Jerrell. And it reads as such: From my mother's sleep I fell into the state, and I hunched in its belly till my wet fur froze. 6 miles from earth, loosed from its dream of life, I woke to black flak and the nightmare fighters. When I died, they washed me out of the turret with a hose. So, from my mother's sleep I fell into the state, basically saying I was born from my mother's womb into the employ of the state being obviously the army here, from the womb falling into the state, saying essentially I was just a child taken up into this war. And then I woke to black flak and nightmare fighters. This is a second womb here, taken, the speaker being moved from mother's womb to the womb of a plane. Now here's this line here, which if you don't know what a ball turret is, kind of seems confusing, right? When I died, they washed me out of the turret with a hose. Well, let me show you. This is a ball turret. This is what you do in a ball turret. Now, seems cramped. If you're claustrophobic, wouldn't be the place for you. However, this is just a diagram. I want to stick here for a moment. You see this apparatus here. That is the only thing separating these men from oncoming bullets from other fighters or from the ground, just boom, right into them. So, if this was your job, running a machine gun in a little metal and glass cage, the line, when I died, they washed me out of the turret with a hose, makes a whole lot of sense, but it's not good. So I want to bring up the term objectification here, because we're going to turn to the second term and talk about how these two things coincide, especially with the state taking young men as property during a time of war. Objectification. Psychologist Barbara Fredrickson of Tommy Ann and Tommy Ann Roberts argued that the sexual objectification of women extends beyond pornography, which emphasizes women's bodies over their uniquely human mental and emotional characteristics to society generally. There is a normative emphasis on female appearance that causes women to take a third person perspective on their bodies. The psychological distance women may feel from their bodies might cause them to dehumanize themselves. Some research has indicated that women and men exhibit a sexual body part recognition bias, in which women's sexual body parts are better recognized when presented in isolation than in their entire bodies. In contrast, men's sexual body parts are better recognized in the context of their entire bodies than in isolation. Men who dehumanize women as either animals or objects are more liable to assault women and display more negative attitudes towards female victims. Philosopher Martha Nussbaum identified 7 components of sexual objectification: instrumentality, denial of autonomy, inertness, fungibility, violability, ownership, and denial of subjectivity. In this context, instrumentality refers to when the objectified is used as an instrument to the objectifier's benefit. That would be like a man being sent off to war to the benefit of the state. Denial of autonomy occurs in the form of the objectifier underestimating the objectified and denies their capabilities, like when a man refuses to go to war, a war about which he knows nothing and has no part in, and he is then sent to prison. In the case of inertness, and I'm not doing this to be men versus women thing, I'm just saying that I think that this term is extendable to men in certain ways. In the case of inertness, the objectified is treated as if they are lazy and indolent. Again, if you get to basic training and you are not particularly capable, you're going to have a rough time. Fungibility brands the objectified as to be easily replaceable. I don't think I really need to talk about that and how it translates into men being taken by the state and put into places of war. Vulnerability is when the objectifier does not respect the objectified person's personal space or boundaries. Again, seems pretty obvious to me. Ownership is when the objectified is seen as another person's property. You are the property of the state. Lastly, the denial of subjectivity is a lack of sympathy for the objectified, or the dismissal of the notion that the objectified has feelings. Feelings will do you wrong in these situations, being sent off to war, things like this. These 7 components cause the objectifier to view the objectified in a disrespectful way, therefore treating them so. This is, in my opinion. So I think that the argument of female objectification is one stating that the only perceived value of women in some sect of society, some fashion of society, some level of society is their sexual worth and merit. For men, I think that this is basically competence, right? And that sounds like, okay, yeah, of course you have to be competent, but with men, if you are not particularly competent or even not particularly competent in a field, I think that the uselessness of you is complete, right? It is, you are not even a person if you are not competent. You should not have feelings. You are a waste anyway. And I don't think that same, I think that is unique mostly to the male experience. So with that sort of argument made, that male male objectification is what allows the state to dispose of men. I don't know if you've ever heard of this term, male expendability. The relative expendability argument, or the expendable male hypothesis, is the idea that the lives of male humans are of less concern to a population than those of female humans because they are less necessary for population replacement. Since the 1970s, anthropologists have used the concept of male expendability to study such things as polygamy, matrilinearity, and the division of labor by gender role. The concept comes from the idea that, from a reproductivity standpoint, one male may be able to impregnate or otherwise father offspring with many females. In humans, this would mean that a population with many reproducing women and few reproducing men would be able to grow more easily than a population with many reproducing men and few reproducing women. I think that this is just another way of society or the powers that be, or just our general human experience saying that men are more expendable. Maybe, some of them rise to the top, but the majority of men are simply expendable. Send them to war. Start a war, find a war, and send some men. See if you can get something out of it. And that has been sort of the maybe not a theme of the past couple hundred years, but certainly a feature of the past couple hundred years, when wars have become less centralized and less territorial, less about the actual survival of a state or a type of people. Wars have become more game-like for the states involved in them. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. There's poetry every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.